It was a real joy to visit Christchurch in New Zealand. It was one of the cities that I've always wanted to get back to. It just has so much natural charm and plenty of beauty. So I've chosen another scene from the Avon. I'd love to see what you think. Okay, beautifully sunlit boat. I've always loved the challenge of architecturally different, whether it's buildings, boats, bridges. And I have painted boats for many, many years, but normally they were very small and normally in the distance, and so they were very sort of consequential. They didn't really sort of have much effect on the overall painting. But with the 2013 trip to Greece, I deliberately did that trip because I knew we were going to be painting lots of boats. And one artist had given me some advice of a technique where you can draw a figure eight, and I felt that was a little too complex and a little too simplified for every different boat. So if I can paint what I see, not so much what I think's there when it comes to the boat. So if I'm lining up the top point of the boat on the left with the position of the back, normally, and the width is right and the height is right, then I'm pretty happy. Because actually the funny thing is, it was this background that was the hardest part. The boat does take quite a bit of work, but I felt it was the easy part. I believe is because when there's not much there, it's harder to paint nothing than to paint the boat, which has lots going on. So I'm just putting in a bit of the green reflective light because it was a fairly high bank. So quite a bit of that green will reflect right down through the entire water area. And once again, I've got to be careful that I don't overdo the water, that it takes away from the boat as well. And this was actually quite a tricky part as well because the shadow is very soft, and it's a soft edge shadow is a little harder than, say, the lovely sharp edge of that shadow underneath the back of the boat, those seats. That's a very found shadow, and you can see how clear and precise they are. They're fairly easy to get. Where that shadow in the foreground, it'll take some subtlety, and so I just have to make sure I get enough reflected light into that shadow in the foreground. But it's a very important one because the front of the boat is in quite a bit of shadow as well, so it has to tie the narrative of that car shadow on the front, where I've got that lovely light on the back. And on this left-hand side, there's quite a bit of reflected light from the timber. And once again, I had to make a decision. Do I go with how light and how reflective that is, or do I play it down? And I thought, no sense in creating more competition for the rest of the painting and the boat and going too strong, especially when you see those diagonal shapes of the bracing structure. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5. That's a very easy thing to put in and then draw the attention away, because this area where I'm working now, that's where I want the viewer really to look. That was the part that really grabbed my eye and thought, wow, what a unique type of boat, which was a real joy to try and capture, because a lot of the classic little rowboats have their charm, but this really did take me to push myself, which is always great fun, especially when the painting gets underway and you that element of joy starts to come in, and you think, and after many years of painting, you can sort of get the feel that this is going to be a good painting, because you can just see how the shapes are starting to come alive, and it's always that translation too. We can put a lot of detail in a scene, and this boat does have a lot of detail, but it's going to require me to balance all that detail up against fluency, up against the reality of the subject as well. And you can see how the back of that left-hand boat, that can very easily take away from the sunlit back part of the boat, the right-hand side. And actually this is funny, it's got a more upper 2/3 focal point. I've never really used a mole stick. I would normally use my hand, but about 10 years ago I actually made that insert, so you can see it's looking a little worse for wear now. But the beauty of it is that, especially when you're doing a vertical or a horizontal, you can square the piece of timber up with the edge of the board, so then it'll give me an idea of if I'm going too square or not square enough. I think one of the other little joys of this scene or this area was all the ducks. They were swimming around us, floating around us. The water was so beautiful and clear, and if we had more time, you almost felt like you would have loved to have gone in for a swim with the ducks. But we don't dry off as well as they do, so I'll leave it for the ducks. But once again, got to be careful I don't overdo it. You'll see that by the time of the first pass over of the background, the very background, that top 1/5, it did change. And actually, for a scene, really, you want that to be the simplest, most simplified part of a painting. If I did the most detailed part in the top part of a painting every time, a sun set, that late afternoon light, well, that's where you'd probably get more information in the top of the painting, not so much in the foreground. But this one is foreground, very strong mid-distance, and then a deliberate, weaker, simplified background. So here I'll come in with the big brush again. I do like the hog hair for doing foliage. A lot of the synthetic brushes, they don't tend to get that texture. Okay, now it's time to come back in and just see if I can get a little brighter with some of the blues and some of those important little values. Because in the overall span of the painting, it is very easy to visually fatigue with colour especially. Contrast is normally not a problem because we can see those so nicely in the overall painting all the time. Okay, wrapping this one up, another signature, and then I'm done. To finish the New Zealand series off, I wanted to pick something that was difficult but also fairly intricate as well. And this one certainly did fit the bill. With all those small shapes and the lighting, making sure I got the boat shapes right, that was really great fun, but also a great challenge as well. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. All the best. Bye for now.